You will not believe the level of insanity this reached. Over a $5 fine, my HOA tried to completely destroy my life. I'm not talking about $500 or even $5,000. I mean $5. But here is the real kicker. After I refused to pay, they escalated the situation like some kind of wannabe mafia. And everything came to a head the day their so-called HOA police force broke into my house, completely unaware that my son, a Special Forces veteran, was waiting inside for them. Before we get started, comment below which country you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far this story goes. It all began with a letter I got in the mail. Failure to pay your $5 fine will result in legal action. I just stared at it, completely in disbelief. The supposed violation was a decorative infraction because a wooden bird feeder in my backyard didn't match the community's aesthetics. At first, I actually laughed, thinking it had to be a typo. I mean, who harasses someone over the price of a sandwich? But this was no normal HOA. Their president, Lorna Wells, acted like her role was running a private government. She had this little group of men who would strut around the neighborhood in black uniforms with HOA security patches sewn on. They weren't real officers, but they carried radios, tasers, and even these cheap knockoff badges they'd flash at residents. It started with just intimidation letters, but then extra fines got tacked on every single week, climbing from $5 to $50, then to $150. Out of pure principle, I refused to pay, and that's when the tone turned nasty. They began showing up on my lawn, snapping pictures, leaning right over my fence. Every time my wife saw them parked at the end of our driveway, she was terrified. Now, this is where things got really strange. I actually caught one of them leaving a flyer that had a fake payment link on it. They had created a completely bogus portal design to look like the official HOA website, but the money was being rerouted to personal account. That isn't just shady, that's wire fraud under federal law. I knew then this was bigger than some silly fine, but it turned out I wasn't the only one who knew how to handle a situation like this. My son, Luke, had just gotten back from deployment. He's Special Forces, disciplined, sharp, and absolutely not someone who is easily intimidated. He told me flat out, "Dad, these aren't just power-hungry neighbors. They're running a scam, and when you push back, scams always escalate. Let me handle the surveillance." So, while I played the part of the clueless homeowner, Luke got to work setting up cameras, logging license plates, and building a file. We weren't just planning to fight this HOA in meetings. We were preparing to expose an entire operation. And then one day it all boiled over. The breaking point happened on a Saturday. I was upstairs reading when I noticed flashlights bouncing across my lawn through the window blinds. First, I thought it was just kids, but then I saw the black uniforms. 3 of these so-called HOA cops were prowling across my property like they owned the place. Luke was already awake. The man has instincts I will never understand. He stood in the dark by the stairwell, calm as a coiled spring, and whispered, "Dad, don't panic. Let's see what they're here for." I peered through the window slats and watched them circle my back porch. Then one of them pulled out what looked like a crowbar. That's when my stomach dropped. This wasn't a bluff anymore. They were about to force their way into my house over a $5 fine. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, make sure to like and subscribe because this story is only going to get better from here. The back door creaked as the crowbar was wedged under the lock. Luke gave me a look and held a single finger to his lips. Then, in absolute silence, he slipped into the shadows of the hallway like a predator in the wild. The door burst open with a crash. 3 men in black uniforms stormed in, pretending to be law enforcement. One of them barked, "Search the house. He thinks he can ignore our authority." Not tonight. That was their mistake. The first man through the doorway never even saw Luke coming. My son moved like lightning. He grabbed the guy's wrist, twisted it, and the crowbar clanged to the floor. In one single motion, Luke shoved him against the wall and dropped him with a sharp elbow to the gut. The man wheezed and crumpled. The second intruder lunged forward, swinging a baton. Luke sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and with a clean judo throw, slammed him onto the hardwood floor so hard the walls shook. The man howled, clutching his shoulder. The third one just froze, clearly realizing they were in way over their heads. He stammered, This is HOA business. You can't touch us." Luke stepped closer, his eyes hard as steel. "You broke into the wrong house." Then, with military precision, he swept the guy's legs out from under him and pinned him face first to the ground with his boot pressed firmly between the man's shoulder blades. From the stairs, my heart was pounding, but I couldn't help staring in awe. This wasn't a brawl. It was controlled, professional. Luke didn't fight like a hothead. He neutralized them one by one with barely any wasted movement. The intruders were just groaning on the floor, gasping for air. Luke leaned down to the last one and growled, "You came in here armed, impersonating officers, and tried to break and enter over a fake fine. That's at least 3 felonies. You're not walking away from this." I finally found my voice and called 911. When the dispatcher answered, I didn't sugarcoat it. "This is a home invasion. 3 armed men in fake uniforms. My son has subdued them. Send police now." Luke kept them pinned, calm as stone, until we saw the red and blue lights flashing through the blinds. And that's when the truth about our HOA's little police force finally began to unravel. The flashing lights outside lit up the neighborhood like a movie crime scene. Squad cars skidded to a stop in front of my house, and real officers rushed in with their guns drawn. They swept the hallway only to find Luke standing tall, his boot planted on one intruder's back, with the other 2 groaning on the floor. One officer shouted, "Step back!" Luke raised his hand slowly, calm as ever. "Relax, officer. They broke in, armed and impersonating law enforcement. The situation's under control." I hurried down the stairs, my hands shaking, but my voice steady. "These aren't police. They're HOA goons dressed up to look like some kind of security force. They broke into my home over a $5 fine." The cops exchanged quick glances, then cuffed the 3 men without any hesitation. "You're under arrest for breaking and entering, assault, and impersonating law enforcement." The leader of the intruders tried to protest, coughing as he was hauled upright. "We were authorized by the HOA. This is official business." One officer just glared at him. "You're trespassers. And that uniform? It's not worth the polyester it's stitched on." As the cops read them their rights, the whole neighborhood began to gather outside. Porch lights flicked on up and down the street. Whispers spread fast. The HOA's private cops got busted. That's when one of the officers turned to Luke. "Sir, you moved like you've done this before. Who exactly are you?" Luke gave the faintest smirk. "U.S. Army Special Forces. Retired." The words hit like a thunderclap. The neighbors who had crowded close gasped. Some of the same people who had quietly supported the HOA's bullying now looked downright ashamed. Others actually started cheering. The arrested men shouted from the squad car, "We were just following orders. Lorna Wells told us to." That name made my stomach twist. Lorna Wells, the HOA president. She had been on a power trip for years, but this sending armed enforcers into my house, that crossed over into insanity. The officers didn't waste a second. They radioed for a supervisor, and within minutes, Lorna Wells herself was being dragged out of her mansion across the cul-de-sac. She came storming over, her bathrobe flying, screaming, "This is a misunderstanding. They were only collecting dues." The supervisor cut her off cold. "Lady, what you did is criminal solicitation. You sent men to impersonate officers, break into a private residence, and threaten a homeowner. You're done." I will never forget the look on her face as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. The fallout was immediate. Lorna was charged with conspiracy, trespassing, and ordering an unlawful entry. The so-called HOA cops faced felony charges for impersonating police and home invasion. The county prosecutor personally called me the next day, assuring me this case would set a precedent. And in the middle of it all, Luke stayed steady. He didn't brag, didn't strut. He just told me later, "Dad, bullies are the same everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's in a foreign desert or a neighborhood with picket fences. You stand your ground." The HOA thought they could send fake cops to scare me, but instead they got exposed, arrested, and destroyed by my own son. And trust me, this neighborhood will never forget what happened.